Jane Austen is Chief Product Officer at Juniver, and she wants to talk about how putting humans bang smack at the centre of your business unlocks all sorts of wonderful things. So Jane, over to you.
Thank you, thank you. Hang on it. Is that okay? Can you hear me? Yeah, great. It's so great to be here. Edinburgh is one of my favourite cities, don't tell Glasgow. And I'm talking about one of my favourite topics, so it's brilliant. So why is talking about putting humans at the heart of your business one of my favourite things to talk about? Well, it's because it's really transformational. If you have happy customers, this is such a fuel for growth, because people who love using their product, they use it more, they tell people about it, which means you can get more customers really cheaply. It means you can grow really cheaply, and it also reduces cost to serve because you've got something that's really easy to use. So people don't have to phone your call centre, people don't drop off, they don't churn. So putting customers at the heart of your business has such an amazing impact, a transformational impact on your business. Don't just take my word for it. This is Zendesk's most recent report. Companies focusing on CX increase their revenues by 80%. So it's really worth doing. It's not just fluff. It's a really important business thing to do, putting customers at the heart of your business. So how do you do it? Well, the first step to being customer-centric is choosing the right metrics to run your business. So you have daily active users, monthly active users. You track this over time and you see what changes are happening. If you're gaining customers or losing customers, what's going on? Are customers valuable? Is their lifetime value more than it costs to acquire them? Are they staying with you? Are they growing? How long do they stay with you? Do they leave? Why do they leave? And are they telling people about you? Because you can't buy your way to significant growth. The way to grow is to get customers to be your advocates. And the other thing that's really important, I don't know if you've heard of this, is North Star metrics. This is such a brilliant concept. It's basically, you think about what's the core of your business and what's that one thing that you measure that everybody, all your metrics ladder up to, that people can focus on. And it means if you grow this, it also grows your business. For example, Facebook's, their metric that mattered was getting people to make friends. If they made 7 friends in the first week, they were much more likely to go on and become a valuable customer. So this is a really, really important thing to do. If your business doesn't know your North Star metric, go and find out. Go and find out what is it that customers do, what's the core of your business, and if you get them to do more of that, that means they become more valuable, you make more money. Now here's some examples. So Facebook is looking at monthly active users, but to grow that is getting people to, I love the cameras coming out, is getting people to have those first 7 friends. Spotify is time spent listening. Quora is the number of answers to questions, so trying to get people to answer more questions. HubSpot is weekly active users. So putting all of these together, having all of your different metrics, seeing how they change over time, and having your clear North Star metric, this is how you start to grow your business and make it human-centered. But this isn't enough, because humans, behind all of these numbers are these weird little humans doing their weird little things, and you need to do research to understand what's going on. Oh, goodness me. So it's obvious, but it's really hard because you don't just need the numbers, you need to understand the humans behind the numbers. You need the what and the why. And you can't just ask people, as Jason said. Here we go. Recognize this? It's the faster horse. And of course, yes, there is no evidence that Henry Ford actually said this, but it's like a meme, it's a virus. People keep using this example. They keep talking about if Henry Ford said, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse because they couldn't conceptualize the existence of cars. And unfortunately, a lot of people use this quote to say we don't need any research at all because there's no point asking people why. Well, actually, if you take a step back, this is true. It doesn't mean no research. It means you just can't ask people why, because people are notoriously bad at predicting future behaviour. I get up quite regularly and say, right, I'm going to eat more vegetables, drink less alcohol, and eat less fried food. And because I'm from Glasgow, this never happens. But I think it might. I hope. I'm predicting it constantly, but it doesn't happen. You can't just ask people what they want because they can't predict a future behaviour. They can't understand what things are possible. Instead, in fact, if you do that, you end up in something called the product death cycle. No one's using your product. You ask them what they want. They tell you. You build it. Nothing happens. You ask people what they want, they tell you, you build it, and you end up in this product death cycle of wasting money. So what do you do? Well, I've put together a little framework, because I do love a framework, and I've been thinking about the horizons that you need to operate in across as the business. You think about the future. You have to have a future that you want to aim for. You have to understand the features that you need to build to unlock that future, and then you have to understand the frictions that are happening in your product right now. So the future is effectively your vision. It's your business and your product vision. It's the long-term mission of the company. The features are your roadmap. They're the things that you build to unlock that future. And finally, the frictions. You have the data and the analytics which tell you how people are actually losing your product, your app, or service right now. So I'm going to unpack each of these ones separately. The first is the future. The future is your strategy, it's the future of your product, it's the future that your product or your business is going to enable. And you always need that balance of earning versus learning. If you're just focusing on earning and not continually updating the future and understanding where your business is going, you have a problem. You need to have a balance across these horizons. And you don't start with the solution. You always start with the problem. And you need to understand what are the components of knowing that a problem is worth solving. Well, it's this. You need to understand the market. What market are you operating in? Who are your customers? What are their needs? What is the context of use? Who are your competitors? And how are you going to differentiate from those competitors? And then how are you going to make money? So these are the kind of questions you need to ask. Who is the customer? What need are you answering? How else could they solve the need? Because you might find your competitor isn't another business. It could just be a pen and a piece of paper. How are you different to the competitors? Why would people buy you? Will people pay for it? Will they pay enough for you to have a viable business and for you to make it worth your while of building the feature? And will they continue paying for it or not? So this is very important, and you need to have this future horizon constantly, and updating it and making sure that you're building towards this. And to build towards this, you have your features. And these are all the things that deliver your strategic vision. And once again, you don't start with a solution. You don't say, I'm just going to build this feature. You take it back and you start with the problem. And the problem could be a business problem or it could be a user problem. And a way to frame this is a fantastic tool called the opportunity solution tree. So this is it here. You start with the outcome. It could be a business or a customer outcome. Then you look at the opportunities. Opportunities are a way of framing the problems in the context of use of your customers. And then you come up with a whole bunch of solutions. And then you have experiments to see which solution is the one to go after. And that way you don't waste time and money building something that might be the wrong solution to the right problem. And here's an example of one that I did for a car company I was working with. So the outcome space, they had a business need and they wanted to start selling more cars online. They wanted a 5x increase in selling cars online. The opportunity space was a way for us to structure the customer research we did. And the customer research could be framing needs, pain points, or something that the customer wants. So here, the customer need, they wanted to know that the car would suit their lifestyle without going to do a test drive or buying online. It's quite a different change. It's a different way of buying a car, isn't it? Because normally you go into the dealership, they'd sort of sell it to you, you would try out the car, you would sit in it. Buying a car online is a completely different mode. So people were worried, is this really going to be the right car for me? Will it suit my lifestyle? Can I get my suitcases in the back? How big is it? There was another pain point because they wanted to increase the number of electric cars sold. And people were so confused about how much it was actually going to cost to run an electric car. It was very clear how much petrol costs, but how much does electricity cost? What rate am I on? How long will it take to charge a car? How much will that cost? And then the customer desire, as I mentioned, people wanted to try before they buy. So for each of these different opportunity spaces, we then came up with a whole bunch of solutions. We did this ideation, we did research, we worked with the business. And here, for example, this was the customer pain point, was people being confused by the running cost of electric. So we came up with a couple of different ideas. Perhaps a subscription with all the running costs included. That makes it really easy to know how much it's going to be, and it was quite a different way of selling a car. Or something simple, a running cost calculator tool on the website. Or maybe we could have a partnership with some electricity company where there was a special charging rate So which one of these was the right solution? That's when you move into the experimentation space. So imagine it was the subscription costs. Well, first thing we could do was simply a sign-up button to see how many people clicked in it, to see if they were interested, and then we could measure that. Or we could run a little pilot to see if it was worth it, to see how much it cost. And this way you ladder from the needs, business or consumer need, the problems that you've observed via research, so you know that they're problems and you know how many people are having them. Are they real problems? Then you go, only then do you go to the solution, and then you experiment. Now, to have an experiment, you need to have a hypothesis. You can't just simply run a couple of experiments. How did I know if the sign-up button was the right thing to do? How would I know if the sign-up button was working? Well, you have to have a hypothesis. And a good hypothesis is a statement or question that specifies the dependent variable, if you, the independent variable, drop a ball, and then what you predict the effect will be. It will fall to the ground. So when you're in the solution space, or when you're in the experimentation space, you have to have very well-structured hypotheses, and you have to know what success and failure is, and you have to agree that up front. Now, the other thing you have to do is, some people think this is an MVP, or MVPs are for trying to understand which experiment is going to work. But some people also think an MVP is just a really bad version of something. We'll do the MVP, we'll do the minimum thing, we'll ship it, and then we might get back later to make it better. That's not an MVP. An MVP is an experiment, but you could also be making decisions about what to emphasize or what to work on and what you don't work on. That's not an MVP, that's something different. That's about how you differentiate. So in this graph here, this is completely fictional. I've made it up as an example. But there's places, so if you imagine Keynote, I love Keynote, I'm a Mac fan, I hate PowerPoint, but I love Keynote. But I also really like Google Slides. But if you look at these two products, you see that they have these different factors across the bottom. Google Slides are quite annoying to use. You cannot make a really beautiful presentation in Google Slides, no matter how hard you try. However, you can collaborate in Google Slides. And Google Slides, their business team has made a conscious decision not to invest significantly in the features that make Google Slides really easy to use, but instead to invest in the features that make Google Slides an amazing collaboration tool. So this is another business decision that you're making. Where are you playing? How are you differentiating? Because you can't build everything. Where are you going to emphasize and make something really good? And other parts of it, you might just it might just not be great. But that is not an MVP. This is an MVP. An MVP is the least that you can do to get enough certainty to take the next step. That's your minimum viable product. It's taking a little step, you're experimenting, because as we said, humans don't really know what they want. They really can't predict the future. So you do some experiments. You test, measure, learn, and you observe, and then you take the next step, and you gradually evolve your feature. And this means that you can maximize learning and minimize waste. So that's your futures. That's how you build features. You iterate, you start small, you learn, you test, measure, and you evolve. And then once those features are out and they're live to the public, then you can start looking at frictions. And frictions is the point where you can experiment and optimize what you've already built. And a really good way to do this is to have a journey map. This is one my team made for Honda, and it lays out the experience of buying a car. We've got information from the dealership, information from websites, in-car information. So this is a journey map of this whole end-to-end experience of buying a car with data, analytics, and research overlaid on the top. And then we can see where there are frictions, where people are dropping out the journey, and we know that's a priority thing to fix. And we can also see where we're spending money on support, where we're wasting money, where we're reducing that EBITDA margin right down, and we want to build that. So we don't want to spend money on support, we want to spend money on building things that get people buying more cars. So when you have a journey map, it helps you understand this entire end-to-end process, where to spend money, what to fix, and why. Now, it doesn't just help you do this, because it's, as I mentioned, this pyramid is all connected, future, features, and frictions, because uncovering a friction can then, if you uncover the right friction, it can potentially change the entire future, or part of the future of your product or your business. Or it can change how you're talking to customers. Now, why am I showing you a picture of Viagra here? Well, I was doing some consultancy with a company that sells, it's basically an online pharmacy, and they sell things which men find embarrassing. So they sell Viagra, they sell baldness pills, And they noticed that they had a real problem because people were dropping out just before completion, just before, ooh, that sounds a bit saucy. People were dropping out. people were people were dropping out before signing up. So why was this happening? And they thought, oh my God, look, we've got all of this data and it shows that people are dropping out at this point where they have to give their email. There's obviously some kind of software issue. There's a software issue, we don't know what it is, people are dropping out and we need to experiment with this page. And I was like, well, hang on a minute. You get Viagra free from your GP. So why are people spending money with you to get Viagra? They're obviously a bit embarrassed and you're asking them for an email. And possibly thinking about the human and not just the numbers, they're maybe really worried they're going to get an email saying, hi, here's your Viagra, 20% off. Instead, they want to know that their information is secure and safe and you're not going to be spamming them. Let's not spend the money iterating and investigating this page. Why don't we spend the money on content and put trust signals all across your buying journey so that people know they're not going to get spammed, their information is safe. So they did that. And the conversion went up significantly. So this is, again, why I think human-centred is not just numbers. It's quantitative research, it's qualitative research. And when you bring them both together, it's incredibly powerful. Here's another story. I was working at Moo. Moo is an online print company. And we had mapped out our entire sort of end-to-end buying journey. And it was a part of it that we knew was really, really rubbish. But for some reason, it was generating a huge amount of money, which is not what you would expect. And we're like, what on earth is going on here? So we put a survey on the site. We asked people, like, who are you? What are you doing here? And we discovered that they were professional designers, one-man, two-man, little professional design companies who were doing design for lots of other little companies. And so again, it was that kind of like multiplier effect. These designers were buying like print for a local hairdresser, print that they'd done for a local coffee shop, and they were really valuable customers, and we were giving them a terrible experience. And because we hadn't really measured this before, we hadn't really put enough effort into fixing this part of the product. But then we discovered we had a whole new customer base that we hadn't really known about before, these one-man band professional designers. And this unlocked a completely new future for me. We'd like, again, the information from the bottom, it has to flow back up into the future. And we realized that we could cater to this very specific audience. So it changed some of our marketing strategy, it changed our content, and of course we fixed the PDF upload tool. And this is what it looks like now. So this is the horizon. I love a framework, I love a double diamond, but there's only one thing I love more than a double diamond, it's a triple diamond. So all of this is a holistic view of your customers. Quantitative data, qualitative data, the future, the features you build, and then the friction. And if you look at these separately, you're not getting enough value from your data, and you're not being a customer-centered culture. Now, that was a great talk on culture, Jason, and there's only really one thing I've got to add. I love this framework. I do love a framework, don't I? This is the Cameron and Quinn framework. Basically, it's a whole series of questions that you and your team can answer, and it helps decide where you are here. So businesses can work across these dimensions. They can be flexible, they can be iterative, people can make their own decisions at their own discretion, or they are very top-down, command and control, potentially like the army, very stable, very rules, very bureaucracy and process-driven. And then you have the other two axes. One is the company very internal, again, very process-driven, or is it very external? Is it focused on customers? And depending where you sit across these frameworks, you may be like the hierarchy. I actually used to work at a newspaper. Newspapers were very command and control. It was very difficult to try and make this a very innovative organisation because the editor was there making the decisions. And I remember I was actually on the newsroom the day that the Charlie Hebdo attack happened. And it was amazing. It was like watching, Alexander the Great swinging into action. Everybody suddenly knew what they were doing because there was rules and processes. It worked magnificently for that, but really badly for trying to innovate because of this top-down command and control, and the editor wanted to see everything. So we had to encourage them not just to become more user-centric, but also to change culture, to enable this much more innovative, iterative, autonomous ways of working. And then there's a final thing I wanted to talk about, which is design. Design of the experience. What are people actually experiencing when they use your product or service? And I could talk about this for hours. Unfortunately, I don't have hours, but I will answer some questions. I'm going to give you like a sort of top tip to really enable your designers to create a fantastic experience, which is a culture of quality feedback. How do you communicate your thoughts on designs? How do you give feedback in a good way that helps the designers understand the business context, helps them make better decisions? Well, the first thing you must not do is reaction-based feedback. You might think this is a really nice thing to say. When somebody, your design team shows you the design, you say, I like it. This is actually really bad. This is just a subjective reaction. I mean, what is the designer supposed to do with this information that you like it? Does it matter? There's only one thing worse. Telling them that it's terrible. Because not only that, they can't do anything with it, and you get a whole bunch of sad designers. Actually, I'm lying. There is something worse than telling people you hate it. Make the logo pop. I hope you've never said that. These kind of like direction-based feedback, because if you can just take one thing from today, is don't start with the solution, start with the problem. And if you're giving this kind of feedback to designers, you're starting with the solution from your subjective opinion. So make the call to action bigger, make the button blue, move the login box. Try not to do this. What you do need to do is critique. You and the designer and the business need to identify what the design is trying to do. And that way, again, you need that structure. You need to understand the context of use, who your customers are, what problem you're trying to solve, how you differentiate, because something might not be very good, and that's okay. A designer or the team might get upset about this, but if you help them understand, we're not playing here, so this part of the experience is not great, and that's okay. We're going to put our emphasis here. So if the whole team has this really powerful business context, it makes the work better and it makes the experience for the end user better. So you and the team need to identify what the design is trying to do. You need to then relate the design or the experience back to the objectives of the business. And then you discuss how the design supports that objective. So that's my big mission to make sure that everyone gives really good quality feedback, perhaps not just for designers, but if you're having a culture that needs to be customer-centered, how do you talk to each other? How do you go away from the subjective to talking instead about the objective business structure? That's the really important thing to do, and that's my only sort of build on Jason's culture. So finally, how do you put it all together? Well, here it is. Experimentation and optimization. So how do you have how do you make it safe to fail? How do you run these experiments? How do you have a hypothesis-led culture where you know what you're trying to get to and you have some experiments to try and see if you're going in the right direction? How do you have a culture that enables this? How are you using data and insight in the correct way? But it's not just data and insight from pure numbers. You also have to understand the human, the why behind the numbers. The metrics, what are you measuring? Do you have the correct metric that matters, the correct North Star measures? And what is the experience like? That often gets sort of tacked on at the end. You have to start with understanding what the context of use is and how you're going to create an amazing experience, how you're going to differentiate. And then finally, the strategy. The strategy is the future that you're trying to create, how you're going to make money, how you're going to meet these needs. And you need to have all of these fitted together. All of these together is how you unlock a customer-centric culture. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Jane Austen, who will henceforth be referred to in the industry as the Viagra dropout lady. There's an opportunity now to ask questions of Jane. You can either stick your hand up, we'll get a microphone live to you, or you can use Slido, as I said before. Nobody seemed to be interested in using Slido the last time. We can get the microphone to that gentleman there, please. If you could identify yourself before you ask your question, tell us who you are, where you're from. Okay?
Ian Tully, Edinburgh. Hopefully that's good enough. Can you hear me okay?
You're a wee bit fuzzy.
Just point it straight at your mouth.
Hello, Edinburgh. I'm Ian Tully. Thanks very much for the talk. Lot of different strands to sort of pull together there.
Yeah.
Just wondering about how you work towards achieving alignment throughout the organisation, a sort of bottom-up, top-down kind of thing.
I think you have to start with the future and the strategy. I think you can't just start with like looking at a journey map and seeing where people are dropping out, because that might be okay, or it may be that you're not clear enough about the context of use and you end up, again, with the Viagra story, fixing the wrong thing or the right thing in the wrong way. it's down to the business to have that absolute clarity of mission and strategy, and that everybody in the business understands that, and then to make sure that you have metrics that ladder up to this so you can measure your outcome. And then finally, you have to make sure that you have the sort of instrumentation and the research and the understanding of what people are actually doing in your product. And I've seen quite often that organisations want the product team or the tech team to come in and solve some of the problems that are actually being solved at the wrong level because they don't have enough clarity about the vision and the mission and the context. And if that isn't there, then the product teams they can't execute, they can't actually solve the problem because it's the wrong dimension, which is why I thought about this framework. It needs to be much more connected, and you need to start, I think, with the future and the context, and everything flows from there.
Did you have representation within teams from a design perspective, or would you have that as a sort of, I've seen organisations where it's sort of like a shared service and they come in, so it's not part of a cross-functional team, which can be a bit of a problem.
Sorry, I've got quite excited there. I would always, if possible, have you, the designer, the product person, and an engineer together, working really closely together. This is how you unlock significant value. If you've just got a product person alone, they might be focusing significantly on the business, and they might be forgetting the qual, the human, what the experience is going to be like. If you have an engineer, they may be lacking some of the business context, and they may not understand eventually how the product is going to be experienced. But if you get all of these people together, it's incredibly powerful. But then again, you need that culture where they can come together, they can have honest feedback, honest discussions. Again, powered by data and research, not just purely subjective discussions, but cross-functional teams, perhaps with access to a good researcher or some data experts. But that's how you unlock this amazing way of working.
One of the questions you asked was, is the problem worth solving?
Yes.
What happens when you get a member of senior management who has a pet problem and comes to you and says, fix it?
Oh, it's very difficult.
How do you then say to them, actually, it's not worth fixing?
Well, sometimes you might just have to say yes. You have to lose a battle to win the war. But I ask them, why? So what's metric? What metric are we going to impact with this? What does success look like? How do you know? And asking these questions in a kind of very collaborative way often helps people adjust what they're thinking. Or I started off life as a user researcher, and one of the things I do now as a sort of product person, as a senior leader, is I do user research of the organisation, not just the customers. So who are these people? What are it's important to them? What do they get measured on? How can you understand what they want? And that's really important. So if the person their bonus is about getting this built, you might not be able to say no, but you might be able to instead reframe it and say, if you do that, well, we expect you might only get this amount of uplift, but if you do this, you'll get lots more, and your bonus will be bigger. Or we could say, let's do an experiment. Let's have that MVP. Let's do test, measure, learn, and we see that no one's using it, and then we haven't wasted the money. So it does come back to money. It comes back to metrics and money, and if you frame things that way, I think it unlocks very senior business people to help them think differently about the customer.
Excellent. Any other question on the floor?
Claudia Duffy, we are a legal tech company. I think you probably answered half of my question. So you have customers at one end of the scale and you try to understand their needs. And then at the other end, you have the product developers. So you've got your engineers, you've got your software developers. But there must be somebody in the middle, so the translator or the interpreter of what the customers want and how these wants will be translated into product features. So that interpreter, that middle person, who should they be?
So that's why I've seen it most successfully with the three people. If you're on a sort of feature team, product design and tech, sharing that knowledge. So if you give the team that context to operate in, so they understand what metrics they need to impact, and then they have access to the research, but that team together they're able to collaborate to understand what it is they need to do. And if there's an analogy called the three-legged stool, if you sit in a two-legged stool, it's quite wobbly, and a one-legged stool is really uncomfortable. So if you want to have stability, get that three-legged stool of the designer who thinks about the experience and the customer, the product person who thinks about the customer and the metrics, and the engineer who thinks about how this is going to be technically possible, and also explains to the rest of the team what they might not even know is possible. And between them, they're able to make really powerful decisions. So I think collaboration is the heart of being a customer-centered company.
Apropos of nothing, during the First World War, they used to mix up cotton, just cotton, the material, with nitroglycerin to produce gun cotton. And the people who were tasked with stirring it, was known as the devil's porridge, sat on one-legged stools.
Oh, wow.
Because it had to be done constantly, and if you fell asleep, you fell off.
Ah, I see. Well, there you go then. That's a brilliant analogy.
I just chucked that in apropos of nothing. Right. Any more questions? No? Right. Okay. If that's the case, then I'll actually ask you to thank Jane one more time, please. That was an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Right.